Hey, I'm Shane Varco, the Executive Director of the Dalgarno Institute. Welcome to our Dalgarno Institute's no-brainer resiliency building sessions. Hey, welcome back to part 2 of the recipe for resilience. Drugs are not part of a successful recipe. I'm going to do a bit of a quick recap from last time, some basic teaching and learning principles to start with. We're going to look at some of the basic socialization and learning stages. All of us start life as a wheelbarrow. We looked at that, and we humans are not just a lump of clay, and we're certainly not just a blueprint. We are, in fact, a recipe. So recapping, a wheelbarrow. What is a wheelbarrow? A wheelbarrow is an empty, powerless vessel that's filled by something or someone else and pushed by something or someone else. And every single person in the world starts life as a wheelbarrow. Everybody starts off this way. No one's born fully equipped. We all start with something or someone else adding to us or taking from us, good or bad. That's just the reality of the way we've been designed. You may recall last time we also spoke about the nature and nurture debate, how that was finished about 10 years ago. Now, it's not about being a lump of clay or being a blueprint, it's about being a recipe. And we decided to make an acrostic around that recipe. RECIPE. Relationships, environment, conduct, information, paradigm and practice, and epigenetics. Now, last time we looked at epigenetics specifically. I'm just going to do a quick little refresher. You can go back to that session if you want to and really dig down into that and drill down into that data if you want to. And there's a lot more, obviously, than what we looked at, so it's important that you actually check that out. But for the purposes of us, we're just going to do a quick review. Heads up, fast fact on epigenetics. It is now clear that experience, be it environmental toxins, maternal behavior, psychological or physical stress, learning, drug exposure, or psychotrauma, all lead to active regulation of the chemical and three-dimensional structure of DNA in the nervous system. Remember we talked about how the epigenome impacts the way DNA expresses itself? It doesn't change the DNA, just how it expresses itself. These epigenomic changes lead to alterations in gene readout, and who knows what else, in cells in the nervous system, and trigger lasting and in some cases perpetual changes in neural functions. That's how important all these factors are, all these experiences are, all these relationships are, all these environments are in shaping the way we are and how we are. And that we can in turn reshape that in the way we make decisions moving forward, and the relationships, the environments, the engagements we have, and the experiences we're involved with. So last time we focused specifically on epigenetics. This time we're going to look at the other 4 factors of our recipe acrostic. Again, relationships, environment, conduct, how you behave and why, information, and your paradigm and practice. That's your worldview, how you see the world, but also how you place yourself in the world and how you live out. That's really important. We're going to look at that a little bit and open up this topic for you guys to drill down into more later on. There are many learning and socialization models, but for our journey, we are going to start you investigating the following model. We're going to use this particular one because of its simplicity, but it also covers the topic pretty well in our short time together. So the key socialization / learning models start with different stages of our life. The first is affective learning. The second, operant learning. Third, observational learning. Fourth, cognitive learning. And fifth, cultural learning. And we're going to unpack these as we go along. The first one is affective learning. That's kind of learning via feeling. Now this kind of starts from the day you're born. In fact, we now know from the science that security for little babies, feeling loved and secure, even in the first 3 to 6 to 12 months, is really important. And that if trauma happens in there, or fearful or scary or hurtful events happen, it can really mess with the baby's development. And those, we talk about the epigenetics, that really starts shaping the way the encoding of the epigenome. So it starts working on the way you develop and how you see the world, how you frame yourself in the world. So that's really important. Now, you've got no control over that when you're young. That's your direct environment. That's your parental environment, or lack thereof. So that's really important. And so that's sort of between 1 and 3, but obviously as we grow, affective learning is really important. Being safe, feeling loved, being cared for. These are things we need all through our life because we are created to be relational beings. So that's really important. Number 2, operant learning. Now, this is more about, the word experimentation is not right. We're going to talk about that in another session, but it's about learning by doing. Like the child, as a little child, between sort of 1 and 3, it starts to just try things. It sees something, it picks it up, it plays with it. It doesn't understand what that thing may be or not be. And it's the environment around it that starts to shape its response to that engagements with their environment. So, you know, when the child wants to take a fork and stick it in the light socket, the parent goes, no, takes the fork off, instructs the child as not to do that, to keep it away from the light socket because it's going to cause great harm. That's an extreme measure, but other measures are really important, teaching the child how to behave in certain ways, keeping them safe, helping them learn in healthy ways. It's really important that you as a parent or guardian or caregiver actually engage in a healthy, caring way for that child. So you're keeping them not just safe, but you're nurturing their security through love and through affection and through boundary setting. Really important. It starts at 1 and even younger. Setting boundaries of this is what we're going to accept as behaviour and this is what we're going to extinct as behaviour. And what you reaffirm and what you permit is enabled and grows. What you don't permit and what you restrict, it often becomes extinct. And that's the process of trying to extinct bad behaviours, like sticking the fork into the light socket. So that's an example. So that's operant learning. The next phase stage, and again, all these continue to grow through life, but they sort of kick in around this stage, is observational learning from about 3 years of age onwards. And this is really important because modelling starts to become a really important issue. Children are picking up not just what you say, but what you do. They're watching you. They're watching what you permit, how you act, what you say and what you do. And they start to watch that and they start to mimic that. Now that modelling process and that mimic process continues again all through our lives. What examples we give to our charges and certainly as you guys are growing, young people growing, you're watching this and you start to copy the behaviour, because particularly if it's seen to be consistently done by a parent. For example, it's no good saying to a little 3-year-old who picks up the F-bomb from somewhere, most likely from the directed parental environment, and saying to the child, don't use the F-bomb, you effing little so-and-so. That's not really helpful. I mean, that's just a really, really bad process, because that creates, even in the 3-year-old, a cognitive dissonance, which means their brain's going, hang on, I'm told not to do it, but they're doing it, and it doesn't make sense. And the whole do as I say, don't do as I do thing, not helpful. So as a parent, as a guardian, not helpful, but also as you're growing as a kid, not everything adults do is helpful. And you may want to mimic it because you think it's cool, but it's not actually helpful. And that can be quite destructive for your developmental practices, and particularly for keeping you safe, but also more importantly, developing your well-being and your resilience in that space. So observational learning is really, really important. Now the next phase is cognitive learning. This is learning via thinking. Now, this starts obviously as we become more conversant with reading and writing. So when you hit school, kindergarten, primary school, so on, you learn by developing your thinking processes. And as we've touched on a little bit with the epigenetic stuff, and we'll see more and more, decisions and choices are based around information. And if you've got the best information available for the best practice, for the best outcome, you can make a smart choice. But if you haven't, you can only choose within the framework you've got. So cognitive learning is really important, not just learning what to think, but how to think logically, rationally, wisely. So you need more than a framework of just, here's a whole bunch of information, work it out. You've got to have frameworks around, what's a good idea, what's a bad idea, who says so, and those kind of things. So the cognitive process is also linked to the affective process. So the affective domain of education and the cognitive domain of education both work together. The cognitive domain is more about who, where, when, how, all those important issues. But the affective domain is about the why. It's about the values and the processes and the understandings and the worldview behind those other things. Those things work together to help us make smarter choices. They help us be innovative, they help us be creative, but they also help us be smarter and wiser and find the best way forward for best health and well-being, for best longevity, for best productivity, for best capacity and agency, all those things that we all want to be better at, and they don't diminish us. So those two processes go well together. Now finally, of course, and this one is probably the one that has the biggest influence on us if we don't have good cognitive and affective mechanisms. This one can be really, really helpful because this is the ultimate modeling kind of experience, or it can be really, really, really destructive. And that's cultural learning. Learning through conformity. In other words, I'm now starting to bounce off of my environment, my relationships particularly. The information I'm getting, the culture I'm subject to, which includes relationships, behaviors, perspectives, values, all those things, I'm starting now bumping into other people's worlds. And what I let in and what I take on board will be determined by the other factors like my worldview, my previous environment, my ability to think through things rationally and carefully and clearly. All those things are helpful when I bump into this cultural space, because if it's not in place, what can happen is I just take on board whatever the culture says. So what happens is I start to hang out with a whole bunch of people, and they're all a good bunch of guys. We're all going to the gym, we're all eating the right foods, we're not involved in drug use and alcohol misuse. We're not involved in those kind of spaces. We're not involved in criminal activities. We're looking to grow our intellectual capacity, our productivity. We want to be better people. We want to help the community. Those kind of environments can be incredibly helpful, and they can help you become smarter, stronger, safer, and all those kind of things, and be a contributor to the culture. But likewise, the alternative is also true. You hang out with people that aren't helpful, people that are into criminal activity, drug taking, all those kind of behaviours that will only lessen your capacity. Then if that culturally informs your behaviour and you don't put it through the matrix of the other things, then all of a sudden you're just taking that on board as well. So again, cultural learning can be very helpful and can be very dangerous depending on how you engage with it. So these are basically the 5 socialisation / learning mechanisms that are in play for most of our life. Now, heads up, this is our next conversation starter. Now, understanding a little more about how we learn and grow in our understanding of the world, what specific learning process did you feel helped you make smarter and healthier decisions, and why was that? And what process was unhelpful to making smarter, healthier and wiser decisions, and why was that? Now, in your groups, your pairs, your setting, discuss that and take down some notes for your journal. You'll note that in all the things we've talked about, even with the epigenetic space, even with the biological stuff that's happening, that we still have control, or the capacity to have control over those things if we are equipped to do so. And that's part of why we're doing what we're doing, to help you guys equip yourselves to make decisions and build capacity and agency in yourself to be the best you that you can be. And part of our journey together is we have our heads up quote of the moment. Now, this particular quote is one of my favorite ones, and it's by an author by the name of Stephen Covey. He says this: "In between stimulus and response is the greatest power you have, the power to choose." Now, as we've said in all the things we've talked about in the last couple of sessions, is that even though some terrible things can happen, environments can be unhelpful, experiences can be really damaging, decisions can put us in some pretty bad places, we can also reverse out of that if we engage our bungee rope and our resiliency script in healthier ways. And remember, that's getting with older and wiser people, learning from smarter, better equipped people. It's about changing the decisions and your habits. And we now know that we can even reverse and or change the way our genes are expressed, and that epigenetic space is pliable. And our decision making and our behaviors all add to that. And that's why this quote is so powerful. It is so completely accurate. Unless you've got a gun to your head and someone's threatening to blow your brains out, you have the power to choose. Even if there's addictive mechanisms in place, you still have the agency to choose. I'm not saying it's easy. And we deal a lot with people in the recovery alumni who have been through the drug using process and have exited it. And for the vast majority of those people, in fact, the vast majority, have exited through non-chemical means. They've had to redefine themselves, recalibrate themselves, new decisions, new relationships, new environments. And all that over a period of time has recalibrated them. And in fact, not only have they made better decisions about their capacity and their agency, but they've passed that on to those following them. They haven't passed on the addiction. They haven't passed on the behaviors that led to the addiction. They've given a different model and a better model. And that's why I love this quote. In between stimulus, the thing that's stimulating you to act and your response to that, like this button's been pushed, how am I going to react? Am I going to go, yeah, I'll just run with whatever I feel, whatever urge takes me over? Or am I actually going to make a decision? No, I'm not going to respond to my urge. I'm going to respond to my values. I'm going to respond to healthy choices, and I'm going to seek out right advice so I can make the right response. And that power to choose is something you have control over. Don't let something or someone else take that away. Remember, you're no longer the wheelbarrow. You're no longer the wheelbarrow. You can make decisions now. You're pushing your barrow and you're filling your barrow. And that's really important to understand. Heads up, our script builder takeaways. Note these down in your journal. Strengthening my bungee rope by adding to my scripting toolkit. Number one, who and how we are is made up of a lot of factors, including our environments, our decisions, our values, and our behaviors. Drug use messes with your genes. Your choices really matter, particularly around substance use, because this will undermine your capacity and your agency quicker than anything else. It is reversible, but as long as drugs are in the system, you're in trouble. Remember, drug use messes with your genes. It's really important. Substance use will mess up things quicker than anything else. It'll diminish your capacity, your agency, and your ability to choose, and really mess it up. However, it doesn't erase your ability to choose. So your choices really do matter, particularly around substance use, as it will not only impact brain development, but can also influence genetic expression for the worse. We've talked about that again. Number three, environments matter, guys. It really does. Not just where, but who with, and the activities and practices you're part of. Some of them you don't have control over, as I said, when you're younger, but at this stage of your life, you have a lot of control over those environments and you get to choose. So exercise your power to choose well. Don't abdicate that to someone else and say, oh, they made me do it, because that won't work. In this particular session, we're going to actually finish up with a how not to say yes to recipe messing drugs. This is a video that was produced by one of our international partners, Drug Free America Foundation, and it focuses specifically on one drug that'll mess up your agency and your capacity and your decision-making properties. Until next time, thanks for watching.
You might have heard about the push to legalize marijuana, but here are some things you probably haven't heard. 1 in 6 youth who use marijuana are at risk of becoming addicted, and daily adolescent users are 8 times more likely to use other illegal drugs in the future and 7 times more likely to attempt suicide. Drugs in our communities aren't the same as they were 20 years ago. Marijuana potency has significantly increased since the 70s and 80s, and new methods of processing marijuana have yielded extremely high potency extracts called wax, shatter, and dabs with THC levels up to 80%. That's a scary thought, especially when you understand that marijuana induces anxiety, psychosis, and schizophrenia, even in those with no prior signs of mental illness. You might have heard marijuana referred to as the gateway drug, But let's put some perspective on that idea. Marijuana use primes the brain for a heightened response to other drugs. Marijuana users are 3 times more likely to misuse prescription opioids and 2 times more likely to develop prescription opioid dependence. You might even think of marijuana as a backyard business, but the landscape is changing. Big marijuana is a lucrative global industry that has followed the big tobacco playbook through their marketing their products to youth and downplaying the dangers. Electronic vaping devices and high THC edibles like candy, cookies, and sodas appeal to youth and allow use to go undetected in schools and the workplace. In addition to public health and safety concerns, marijuana cultivation poses significant environmental risks. Marijuana grow sites are poisoning farmland by endangering native animals and their habitats, diverting water resources, deforestation, and polluting water with toxic waste runoff. And there's this. In states that have legalized marijuana, the black market continues to thrive, leading to crime and violence. Drug crimes are not victimless. Traffic deaths involving drivers who tested positive for marijuana more than doubled, and there has been a significant increase in emergency room visits, hospitalizations, and calls to poison control. So while you might think that marijuana is no big deal, it's time you know the truth. Go to dfaf.org to learn more.